Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about what makes a good adaptation. Jingle, jingle, jingle from the Jingle Gnome.
The thing is, I genuinely can't start the podcast until, you've done that. My brain is there needs to be a beat, and you saying jingle, jingle provides the necessary structure for my brain to be
exactly.
Okay, we're done now.
Listeners, and go listen to, all the old episodes, you'll realise the moment I pick up where this starts, and it's just a thing now, and it happens all the time.
So I have to, as part of my job, I give talks, and half the time when I'm practicing to myself, I start my talk and it's hello, I'm Eli and this is my job title, I'm here to talk about this. But so often I go, hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read.
I nearly did that in a Zoom call the other day. I was whoopsies.
Yeah.
This is the thing, is I suspect my okay, my giving presentation voice is not my podcast voice, because my giving presentation voice is crippled by fear, in a way that but I do feel like they probably tap into the same the same energy,
the same energy, yeah.
Yeah.
I was told once I sounded like a cross between the people you listen to learn English from in a CD in a car and a primary school teacher when giving presentations.
You give excellent presentations.
No, it is so fair. I go so posh.
Well, I'm extra loopy today, and I'm probably going to be more incomprehensible because last night, so at time of recording, and I think this one is coming out fairly soon, maybe?
Yeah,
so this won't be too out of date. So last night we had our Purim party, or my friends hosted, and Purim is the Jewish holiday where you are mandated, we are literally commanded to get really, really drunk. Obviously barring, if you have health reasons to not do so, or if you're in recovery, going to a Purim party might not be particularly safe for you. But I am profoundly hungover now, so please bear that in mind as we go on to yell about adaptations.
Be kind to Eli in your thoughts.
Kind to Eli. Yeah.
Don't shine bright lights at them or make loud noises. Yeah.
Hush, hush.
The only thing I remember from, because we did Purim here last year, is that I put my foot in Hamantash and I wasn't even drunk.
Yeah.
That's my main memory of that.
Oh.
Yeah, Hamantash were good though.
Mm-hmm. Shall we kick off?
Yes, sorry, this is the baking podcast. We're talking about desserts again.
Who would you cast in the live-action adaptation of the Purim story, Megala Esther?
Oh, dear. Okay, I'm going to lead with a basic bitch question, I'm afraid. Mm-hmm. What is you guys' favourite adaptation? And what, in your opinion, is the best adaptation? And if those are different, I want to hear about it. Is there a difference between your favourite and the best?
Oh. See, I think I have a special place in my heart for the 1995 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, yeah.
I read the book for GCSE. I'd definitely read it before GCSE then. And I really liked how close the adaptation was to the book. So it made studying it a lot easier for me, because I think in some cases I'm a bit of a visual audio learner. So it made it a lot easier. And back then, audiobooks were less accessible. Couldn't get your hands on them.
Like gold dust.
Cassettes. What-de-do? So,
tapes from the local library and those, horrible plastic...
Or CDs, you couldn't get them. So, I think I really appreciated that version of Pride and Prejudice. So I think that's probably the best one.
I had a really similar experience, with, most of my revision was, because I'd seen it often enough. Me and my sister, we had a thing. Well, I mean, I still do this.
It's such good comfort TV,
Yeah, we just rewatched it. We rewatched it enough that I could quote it really easily, and because they basically lift the dialogue straight out of the book, that actually works as a revision tool.
It does, and I guess aligned to that also Much Ado About Nothing. I think that as a revision tool.
It's not. Is it an adaptation though? I guess it is an adaptation when you do it as a movie instead of a staged production.
Yeah. I mean, they're all adaptations. It's kind of interesting because you're skirting into the almost the classical music thing of a given performance of it is an entity in its own right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Oh my god, you can tell I've been doing too much programming because my brain was it's an instantiation, it's an individual instantiation of a class object. I'm
no.
I have an answer to each of these, and my favourite adaptation is the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yes,
actually, I love them.
I don't think it's the best.
Oh, interesting.
I think the best adaptation I have seen is the Good Omens TV series.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I haven't read Lord of the Rings books. It's on my to-do list. I have got the audiobooks. Like, I'm going to get there eventually.
Yeah.
And I think I love Lord of the Rings as, again, comfort watch.
Yeah.
The music, the score, just the whole vibes. But it's one of those things where I probably would never have read the book first before watching the film. It's like one of those, like, I'm watching The Expanse now. It's based off a book. I might pick up the book because the adaptation's quite good. So yeah, it falls into that category for me. Like, it's good enough to make me go and want to pick up the book and read it.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I might... See, I don't have necessarily, like, well-formed opinions on this. And, like, I think there's definitely an argument to be made of Lord of the Rings being the best adaptation.
Yeah.
Like, it is very, very good. The Martian is also very good. And I think what I like about the Good Omens adaptation and the Martian adaptation is that they both took a very intentional approach to the change in medium.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas I think the Lord of the Rings maybe... I'm not going to say it didn't do that.
The thing is, I don't think it needs it to the same extent. So one of the things that struck me when you were talking about both the Lord of the Rings and the Martian is that I think they both took, the adaptations for me, both took aspects of the book that I found initially quite dull and turned them into something that I could actually enjoy. So in Lord of the Rings, the first time I tried to read it, because the second time I tried to read it, I just absorbed it in a sitting and I adored every moment of it. The first time I read it, I found a lot of they walk.
Oh, that Tom Cardy TikTok, yeah.
I found that stuff really difficult to get through. But the thing is, in a visual medium, it's just a montage, and it's a gorgeous montage with an amazing soundtrack, and I think that's how you should see that, you know? I think that, that really works. And that with The Martian, I had a similar thing with the science, because I'm not that good at that stuff. My brain tends to switch off, particularly if I'm reading it. If somebody's explaining it to me, I find it easier to follow. But, so I basically just didn't read any of the kind of like the MacGyvering type stuff in The Martian, where he goes into a lot of detail about like how he's fixed the hab or why why this signal works and all of that sort of the technical stuff that I know all the engineers of my acquaintance got really into. I just skipped in the book pretty much. And then in the film, because you just watch him do it. Mostly
it's a bit more passive. I find that a bit easier,
and you have people workshopping it and they put the character work in a bit more in a way. I don't know, it was more instantaneous and there was less of it, so I didn't feel like I was getting bogged down in the minutiae of how the problem solving worked.
So in those situations, I guess what you're describing is something that was a drawback in the book.
It's better suited to adaptation than it is to text in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, like, if you're not really into it, it becomes a very difficult read. And, like, say, maybe, like, for me, this might be something with Lord of the Rings. Like, reading it with a physical book, I found quite difficult. So this one, I'm going to have another go at it with audiobook. But to be honest, I mean, half the reason I love Brandon Sanderson, because I know what I'm getting myself into. It's a very, like, not copy-paste, but it's very, like, he has a schedule for the books comes out. It's not it is high fantasy, but at the same time it's not like really in depth. I don't have to engage my brain. I can just switch off for 3 hours and just read, and that's fine, and it makes me happy. And
like dependable.
Exactly. Like I know what I'm getting myself into. Whereas say something like, to be honest, if I hadn't read Wheel of Time before now, I probably, again, would probably struggle to get into it because it's such a big series. But because I started reading it when I had, nothing else better to do with my time.
This is what I mean about Kid M would have been super into it, but Adult M is tired.
Like being a teenager with no friends and all the spare time at school because I didn't do work in school.
And like my read speed when I was a teenager was off the charts.
I know, it was like I skim read to high heaven and until like the tree fell down and we had no electricity and nothing else better to do other than read books. I don't think I ever got back to that speed.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like I go back to books that I sped read in childhood and I get more out of them now because I think I read better.
Yeah.
Well, you have the benefit of years of life experience as well.
Yeah, but I think I don't rush in the same way. I'm more I'm a more, I don't want to say mindful reader, but I feel like I've finally hit that place where I'm like, I am paying enough attention to this that I'm picking up on and I can appreciate the craft of it without getting like bogged down in like the secret academic that lives in my brain going, you should be taking notes.
Oh, yeah.
Something else okay, so I think Wheel of Time as a favourite adaptation, like I do have, I mean, as bonus episodes and chats with our friends of the podcast will say, like, I didn't think it was 100% perfect, but I think one of the things I think I love it is the fact that now there's so many more of my friends like you you've watched it and I can like talk to you about these characters who I've loved for so long, and you don't have to read the book.
Because I'm absolutely not going to, and it's really nice to be able to share that with you now.
Exactly, like it's such a huge commitment. And similarly, like with Lord of the Rings, you know, before you had those adaptations, if you are someone who found those books quite dense, it was just inaccessible. Like you weren't going to know that story.
It's a cultural touchstone that you're sort of missing out on.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's making me really, really salty about the fact that the upcoming Amazon series does not look how I hoped it might. Is because the Silmarillion could really use that treatment, right? Because there's so much cool stuff in there, but people are just never going to read it, and that's fair enough because it is absolutely, like, you think the Lord of the Rings is dried, the Silmarillion is like the Sahara.
It's dense as I mean, I read dry stuff for my degree. The whole of my degree was like, hey, will you read the most dried up, crusty you've ever seen in your life? And I still couldn't get past 2 pages of the Silmarillion.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the Silmarillion. I adore it, but it would be. I don't want people to have to read it in order to enjoy it. And it's a shame that I don't think the upcoming adaptation is going to do that, and it means that there won't be an adaptation that does do that because frickin' copyright and you know.
I find it really frustrating though, like when there is an adaptation that absolutely trashes source material. And I'm not talking about like I mean like I have problems say with the Wheel of Time adaptation that say for example Perrin killing his wife. I'm like, no, what? You didn't need to do that. No. An Amazon executive made that change and I hate it. And there's changes in episode 8 due to COVID that they had to make that I also don't agree with, but like say for example, I remember so the Shannara Chronicles, right? I loved those books when I was a teenager. Got them from Scholastic Book Fair. I remember sitting in the cinema and this trailer started, and I was like, oh, this is very much like those books I read. I might be into this. And I was like, wait a minute, it is the books I read, and I was like really, really excited about this series. And then it was just
not good.
And I was so disappointed because the thing is that the later books have so much to give in them. It's such an interesting intergenerational scope of a story. And then it was just, because the adaptation was it doesn't get anything more. Like, same with The Hobbit.
Are we gonna talk about Game of Thrones in this episode?
I mean, we might have to.
I mean, I watched all the bits mainly for The Lady Had the Dragon. That was my insight into these, and also Peter Dinklage's character.
And then they did her such a goddamn disservice.
And like, I haven't even seen season 8, and I know it.
Don't. There isn't enough whiskey in the world. Don't.
It was. I read the plot and I was going, wait, I am a passing viewer of this when I was stressed during my undergrad, and I was like, oh, let's just watch this for the, everyone else is watching it, so I'll just, see what it's about. And it's not. I'm a bit like nah about it. I'm not going to read the books. I'm not. It's not my cup of tea. But I like Dragon Lady and I like Arya, and you're like, okay, I can get behind them. And then it was like, yeah, I've
let's just completely butcher any like. Because the books themselves, right? So Game of Thrones, not Wheel of Time, Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
Different epic, decades-long fantasy series. Like, George R. R. Martin's been writing it since, like, the 70s, I want to say. And, there are people who have been fans of this, for decades. And then to have this show come out and just trash the source material and just not do it justice is such an insult to that appreciation that those fans have for it. I mean, thinking about adaptations that don't have respect for their fan bases.
I wondered when we get to that.
BBC Sherlock.
Yeah, because they hate us. They hated us. Like every time they did like a fan insert character, and
every chance they get to take a jab
at nerd girls, because the thing is they don't want it to be a nerd girl show because they have no respect for nerd girls, despite the fact that we make the world go round. F you.
Yeah, nerd girls, gender neutral.
Yeah. Like, girl in the way a ship is a girl, but
like transformative approach to fandom rather than a curative one.
It's kind of like, I remember when Like when Sherlock first came out, and I was like, oh, this is the, it's, I hadn't read the books, and I thought, oh, this is a good show. And then as it went on and on and on, I was like, oh, what I liked was, Moriarty guy, I can't think of his name, he's a brilliant actor.
Andrew Scott, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
I love
did
him.
such a good job. And you're like, okay, I'm watching with these particular characters. And then when it like went off the rails with that Christmas episode where it was like, and everyone woke up from a dream and they were on drugs.
I didn't even make it that far.
And like, I remember my entire
Jumping the
family,
shark.
it was like the thing we watched on Christmas Day or Eve or whatever. And I remember we were all sitting there and we all looked at each other going, what the f*** did we just watch? Like, why did we just waste an hour of our life for this? And it's like, it was literally and they all woke up from a dream. Like, when you're in year 7 and they say, don't put that in your creative
Whatever
writing.
you do not do that, yeah.
You know what is a good series of Holmes adaptations that's just like, they just ported the books directly to screen is the Jeremy Brett series.
Yeah.
And I grew up on those. Elementary is also amazing, but it is far more transformative.
Yeah. It's very much, it's a modern AU. And
it's a modern AU version of Sherlock. I think, like, if you had to pick BBC Sherlock versus Elementary as a modern AU, the Elementary does miles.
Even though I think Elementary, in terms of plot, is further away from the
It doesn't take its plots from...
Yeah.
It drops hints, and so you've got things like Charles Augustus Milverton still being a blackmailer, for example, but it doesn't... they're so different for the modern day, and there are lots of plots that just aren't based in canon.
Like, they take characters, and that seems to be kind of it. I tell you what, I think it works better as and this is just thinking about form now, but like, I think the American style of sort of cop
the procedural
suits Sherlock Holmes better.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of how they came out, right? They were short, installations of installments.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah.
And so that kind of I think that when the people who adapted Elementary sat down and thought about it, they actually treated the source material with far more respect and understanding of like where it lies in the landscape of the fiction that it was in its time, and the kind of people who were into it. Whereas, Moffat and Gatiss just want everybody to think that they have the most galaxy brains of all time.
Yeah. And I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but they do not.
They really don't. Misogynist to boot as well. Everybody should watch H. Bomber Guy's video about it.
Like, I think for me, like an adaptation, like a good adaptation, like I said, it will either A, introduce my friends to a series that I've loved and I can talk to them about it, or B, like it's opening up, there are going to be changes from the book to a film or TV show. Like, that is absolutely given. Like, you can't pack them all in. But then when it deviates so much and it's also like, if it deviates and it's good, you're like, okay, I can see this is like...
Yeah.
Well, going back to Good Omens, they added stuff in and they changed, they extended the ending. And I mean, partly that's because it was Neil Gaiman was doing it. And so, he one of the living one of the two authors. So, obviously has an innate understanding of the source material.
Yeah.
It worked.
That worked. But if they had done it and it had been garbage, it would have sucked.
I tell you what, as well, the other way that the Good Omens adaptation is a very strong, adaptation of the book is that the stuff that's not about Aziraphale and Crowley, I don't give a shit about.
Yeah.
Just like the book.
Which is very true to the original.
Like, the weaker is the that's not Az and Crowley, and that is also true of the adaptation.
I mean, to be honest, like, it's kind of when we talked about that. Like, so I watched the show and hadn't read the book. And when I watched the show, the thing I loved about it was Crowley and Afrazazi, who his name I can't pronounce because that's Aziraphale because it's not written in front of me and dyslexic.
Aziraphale.
Anyway, and I love their banter, like Crowley's, he plays Queen, he drives a Bentley, like that entire setup was brilliant. I couldn't really care about the kids. Like, I didn't really give a shit about I just want that's what I cared about. I want Crowley turning up in his Bentley playing Queen. I want Aziraphale in his bookshop in London in Soho. And I think in the adaptation they leaned into it a bit more because that is what people like.
I mean, most of the new material was theirs.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing that I really liked about it.
Yeah.
It shows an understanding of their audience.
Also, I think the other thing I like about the Good Omens adaptation. And we are going to, for now, leave out the Word of God author what's it about queer narrative and Good Omens, because
Neil Gaiman, do better.
Yeah.
Challenge 2022.
Yeah, or just stop talking. Just stop talking about it. Stop talking about it. Anyway, one of the things I quite liked was the kind of, I feel like the book narrative, the sort of, it's a different queer narrative, like the way Aziraphale specifically, because they added more of the angels and Aziraphale's interactions with the angels, you got a lot more of this kind of...
You get the homophobic family.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
this kind of like, you've been stuck trying to be good TM for so long, and like this... Yeah, just, it was a very... And the kind of like, knowing maybe that Crowley loves him and that they, you know, that he would be there for him, and still not being able to quite... be like, actually, yes, I can commit to this. I could, you know, the bandstand breakup. You know, there was some really good stuff in there. And
he's got things to work through.
Yeah. And I think it's a very different look.
We don't get that pain in the book.
Yeah. And I think that I really appreciated that about it. That was something that I really enjoyed. Like, I think sometimes they did a similar, I felt like some of the stuff that they did was a bit like the way that Sherlock would be like, we're not gay, you know, the sort of like,
let's make lots and lots of jokes about the fact that these two men might be in love with each other, and then laugh at you for thinking that there might be something to that.
It felt like a lot of those were badly placed, in that, like, because of just everything else that was going on, it felt more like the reason this is funny is because they're not dating. That's the joke, that people think they're dating and they're not. And for that to be, like, juxtaposed with the very queer Aziraphale and his terrible family narrative, I don't know. I felt that was an odd choice.
It felt mean in a way.
It felt mean, and I didn't really enjoy it. But, like, I've seen people who did, you know?
Like, I would have loved... Imagine if it was, like, a little side-running joke that they keep trying to find time to, like, go on a nice date together and they just can't because the world's ending.
Yeah.
You know, that would be a much funnier bit.
Yeah.
It annoys me as a token straight cis person. Like, because everything is catered, quote, for me, you know, in that sense. And, like, it's... It was one of the things I really appreciate about Wheel of Time adaptation is that they, like... They were like...
Oh, yeah, same. In
the books, Moraine and Suan have a relationship when they're younger, and then it's like, man, we were graduation now, so that's not a thing. And in the TV show, it's like, no, it's still a thing. And I was like, thank you. Why the fuck would they end, like, a 10-year-long relationship because they've just graduated from magic uni? Like, you know, like, what, you know, in the books, it is very blatantly said that I said I have relationships with multiple of the warders, so why would the warders not have relationships with each other? Anyone? No, and it's just in the show.
Yeah,
it's there from the outset, and like
and it's just not sort of made a big deal of it. Just is
there, and it made me like just very happy for like, look, it's representation, not hard. Also, please just make some of the main characters like queer. So like but like, you know, it just made me happy as a
I really actually, one of the things I enjoyed about the adaptation was how character driven it felt. And I think a lot of that was sort of the relationships that we got to see, like, the relationships between the warders and how tight-knit the village group is. And I felt like that was, they were like, what's the beating heart of this? Oh, it's the people. And then they really went for it. And I really liked that. I thought that was a really good choice.
Yeah, and I think that's where Game of Thrones really fell down, because what happened was they caught up to the books, right? That it's a problem that anime has been dealing with since anime has been a thing adapting manga, and they had the opportunity to, you know, they had to write their own material or get George R. R. Martin to try and, you know, contribute some material. And it could have gone either way. It could have been amazing, and it really, really wasn't. And I think it's because for whether or not you like the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire books, they are very, very character driven. Each character does have motivations that are consistent by and large, and, you know, obviously it's flaky in some parts, but
it struck me as very much a like need against need kind of setup when I read it.
Exactly, it does that, and it completely the show just completely threw that all out the window in favour of not even well-structured plot, just flashy moments and cool lines and shock value. And it doesn't stand up. You know, you think about Lord of the Rings, it's been 20 years,
I still get shivers. Every single I know your face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every single time I get chills. Like
those movies will be good forever. Game of Thrones had its like 15 minutes, and it's just people wanted to forget about it as soon as it was over.
And what's so frustrating is like one of the reasons that I liked watching the show was I couldn't care about the politics. It was the actors and the characters. Like, you know, that they were so evil or manipulative or, you know, it was kind of like Tyrion, great like political I say manipulator, but, you know, political player. Charles Dance's character, whose name I've forgotten, Tywin Lannister, that's the one. Like, they're all just... I couldn't give a shit about, like, you know, any of the other crap that they throw in, because it's like, oh, yes, it's an 18 plus, so we need to have naked people. Like, nobody gives a shit about that. Give us politics. Nobody gives a shit about naked people. Like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I tell you what, The Witcher season 2 has absolutely does not have any of that in the second season. In the first season, they were just like, oh, we got to have some nudity because, like, you know, to show that we're an adult show.
They thought they had to be like Game of Thrones, and it's like, I think Wheel of Time had that in its first episode. Of like, oh, look, it's gory because people think everything's got to be like Game of Thrones to be fantasy, and it doesn't. It really doesn't. Like, the one thing I love about the Wheel of Time books is it's all like cut to black, so you don't, you know, if you don't want to read that or it's not there.
And sometimes that can be creepier. Like, that can be really effective.
Yeah, like the having to imagine it for yourself is so often worse than anything an author could specifically say to you. Although, speaking of the horror stuff, I guess not the sex, presumably. Although bad sex writing is one of the things that will throw me out of books so fucking fast.
Agreed.
Like, just if you can't do it, don't do it. There's Fade to Black is a noble and ancient tradition. If you can't write good sex, just don't write sex. Stop it.
Sorry, I don't know why
if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. If you don't have any good sex to write, don't write any.
Anyway, not that that's the point of this
moving
episode.
Moving on.
Game of Thrones, and therefore Peter Dinklage. Is the Serrano adaptation out?
Oh, it's out. It came out in
Have you seen it?
Late February. I haven't seen it yet. I'm really excited.
I was going to ask you to give your so that's out, and I would also like to see it. But also, like, going to a cinema is still not like...
I'm not... Even for Cyrano de Bergerac, I'm a bit like...
We are still in the middle of a global pandemic, whatever Matt Hancock has just been heard saying on the radio. Idiot.
Piece of Anyway. Oh, did you see that headline that was like, COVID experts baffled as to why numbers going up, and the next line in the article was all restrictions were lifted?
Yeah, like, the lifting of all COVID-related restrictions.
Like, a Hungover Village idiot could tell you that. Like... But it's fine. It's fine. We've got our lateral flows, guys.
We are all the little
now.
dog at the table where everything's on fire.
We are so not staying on topic today.
Sorry, I'm supposed to be wrangling the cats, and I'm just letting you guys talk because I'm enjoying it.
It's a meander through adaptations, and you know the stuff we had to watch over the pandemic because there was nothing else better to do during lockdown. You know,
hey, The Witcher's technically an adaptation. We could talk about that.
It is.
Although, to be fair, have any of us read the source material?
No.
Or played the games?
No.
I'm probably not going to, but I did enjoy it a lot. So, you know, who knows?
It is one of those things where it's like, it's sort of similar to the Six of Crows adaptation, whose name I've forgotten.
Oh, Shadow and Bone?
Shadow and Bone. Like, I do want to read Six of Crows because of the adaptation. Yeah. And it was like, kind of, the level of, I don't have to engage my brain to watch this. It's happy. And, like, I say happy, like, the show is obviously quite dark in places, but it's
not, like YA dark. It's not like...
It's young adult dark. I don't have to engage my brain, and I can just...
It's just a lot of pretty assholes doing crime.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I was thinking
what's
about
not to love about that?
In preparation for this episode, and you might have to hear me out, because, like, I was trying to think, before, like, really realistically, before Twilight, before Boy Wizard books, and really, actually, to be honest, more Twilight than Boy Wizard books, because the Boy Wizard books were global phenomenon. I remember that in school. Everyone went and watched the films. And I think Twilight was probably one of the first series where you had this fan base and the internet, and it also, like, catapulted young adult fiction aimed at, like, women, at girls, teenage girls, into the limelight. And off the back of that, you had Hunger Games and that adaptation, you had Divergent series and that adaptation.
It's like they suddenly realized they could make money out of adapting these things, and suddenly we have so many more of them than we used to.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I was thinking about it, because, I read Twilight when I was at school. I've got the hardback edition somewhere in a loft because everybody read it. And it was was it trash? Abso-freaking-lutely. Was it good? No. However, did everyone read it? Yes. Did everyone go and watch the films? Yes.
Do you know what that reminds me of is one of the things that I've noticed, that big fandoms, the source material doesn't have to be good. It just has to make your brain go brrr,
Yeah.
Supernatural is a prime example of
right?
that.
The potential is actually far more interesting than the thing itself being good. You don't have a huge amount of fan fiction written for Avatar: Last Airbender because the show, it doesn't need it.
No,
but there is. I tell you what, I have trawled through that, and there is actually quite a fair. There is a fair.
But it's all stuff that's after the end. What do they do next?
Yeah,
more so than it is
AUs
fixing things.
It's not fixing the plot.
I tell you what, my favorite of all of them. And I'm not, as a rule, there's not much in the Avatar fandom that I'm super into. But I enjoy it when it comes around, but it's not one of my big. I will go actively looking for it. I will put this link in the reference post, but I fix it where Zuko goes over the side at the end of season 1 and gets picked up by Sokka and Katara's dad, and basically gets adopted, and that changes the whole that's
changes
really
everything.
good.
I love for want of a nail reimaginings. Thinking actually of fandoms that you really like, Em.
Oh yes,
and things that are actually also adaptations. The Untamed.
Yes. Oh, I wanted to talk about that because, so one of the questions I was going to ask you is there anywhere where you've seen the adaptation and you've read the book and you actually prefer the adaptation? Because I feel like my gut instinct is usually that I'm always going to prefer the book and the adaptation will be good or it will be bad, but that won't, it's the adaptation's almost always kind of secondary to me. But the Untamed is actually one of the places where I'm these are different entities and they both deserve to exist. And I enjoyed the adaptation more, but I think the book is actually a better piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. I'm struggling to think of an example because all of the adaptations I really like have solid source material.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm trying to think realistically, the only adaptation where I've been that invested in the source material has been Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
Harry Potter Boy Wizard books. I was, I read them, but to be honest, if you went time travel back to 14-year-old Lottie, I'd tell you they were trash books because they're not as good as Wheel of Time, and everyone's like, oh my god, it's the best thing I've ever written. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. It's a thing.
Yeah, whereas I
awful.
Definitely hyperfixated on it.
and then even said Twilight adaptations, I didn't really give a apart from the fact that I was just annoyed at those books in general because they had so much potential and they threw it away. For a dumb ass, give me Rosalind's backstory, give me Alice's backstory, give me their book. Please.
I tell you what, they've got the DC TV problem, right? Where I don't know if any of you guys ever watched Arrow, but
no.
They had this problem, and that whole TV universe kind of had that problem for a while, where they would set up, they'd be like, oh, here's this male hero from the comics, and then he would be the most milquetoast, boring piece of shit you ever saw in your life. And every single secondary character was more interesting. And you were like, please just kill off Oliver Queen or whoever and let me spend time with Felicity Smoke and all of these other people.
Yeah.
And Twilight's very that.
Didn't everybody involved in the making of that show also hate the main dude?
Quite possibly.
Isn't that where that meme of the tombstone comes from?
Possibly?
Where everyone's
I feel I heard a vicious rumor about that, but yeah.
I think that's kind of the thing with, especially fan fiction, that it half the time it's people writing. I mean, I don't write. It's not my cup of tea. I'm not great at it. But when I read, when I've, you go and look at some of these things, and you've people, I don't know, fixing the plot hole in XYZ book, or AU, or whatever they're doing, and they've got hundreds of thousands of words of fixing your problem. And that, to be honest, that's what pissed me off so much about Sherlock was you had so much good fanfic. And you use none of it.
I mean, to be fair, they can't, copyright-wise, they can't use it.
I know they're not going to use it, but it's kind of you had...
The disdain that they had for it. is just...
It's like most of these writers are better than you.
And also, how can you disdain something that's like, let's be honest, free advertising? Like, the whole thing is free advertising. It's free.
It's also like, it's meta of your work. It is a narrative way of people looking at your work and going, what's this about, really, when you get right down to it? You know? And I love that.
I would love, like, in terms of, like, my job and the kind of work that I do, or, like, imagine being able to understand your audience. Imagine your audience talking back to you like that. That's so valuable.
That's so cool. That is, I mean, some of the, like, the most interesting conversations I've had on the internet, and I don't have many, so, like, this is a low bar maybe, but, like, shush, I'm shy. Like, people commenting, people who leave essay-length comments on your fanfic, and then you end up yelling with them back and forth about, like, why you did this thing, or I didn't realize anybody was going to notice that, or, you know, like, it's really interesting. Like, it helps you with the whole, like, because the work is smarter than you are so often. Yeah. And everybody who reads it brings something, it creates a new story in their brain. You know, how is that not cool?
And it's not only that, it's like, if you are an aspiring author, I mean, I know this is a bit off topic, but if you're an aspiring author and you're writing stories, you're crafting your narrative, and you're effectively practicing with these characters you already know, it's just free feedback. Like, how can anybody, like, that's what boggles my mind. Like, you know, if you took, you know, like, for example, like, what's the Bond one?
Oh, OOQ, yes.
OOQ, there we go.
I love that. Eat it up with a spoon.
If you've seen the most recent film, I feel like somebody had gone, okay, we need a coffee AU fic thing, we need Q at home, like being homely, and I feel like somebody's gone, you know what? It's not fan service, but it's kind of going, we see you, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's. I can't see how people, like, I can get it if it's like, I find IRL fan that I find a bit too much. Like, if it's real people, I'm like, bit weird.
Yeah.
But like, if you're just taking characters from books or films or TV or whatever, and you're just transforming them into a new story for people to read, like, in some ways I consider that an adaptation, because it's just basically taking it forward. Like, there's so many actual published books where it's the estate of some writer has allowed them to take these characters forward.
I have a facetious answer to the question of, is there an adaptation that you like more than the original? And I would like to take a minute to talk to you all about the masterpiece that is the 2004 film Troy.
Oh boy. Okay, yes.
Which I would always watch over reading the actual Iliad.
Yes, to be fair, I don't think I'm ever going to read the Iliad, although I have, because I started listening to Son of Achilles for a future episode. I've been going down the Wikipedia rabbit hole on, like, what the hell's going on, because I've played way too much Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and so I'm like, I recognise that name. It's that person I met in the game. And so
Lottie, you have got to watch Troy. It is exquisite.
I have watched Troy. I mean, I haven't watched it in ages. I have watched it mainly, I think, because I had, like, a crush on Orlando Bloom at that point or whatever.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's probably the reason I watched it when I was like,
We've all
14.
been there. We've all been there.
But it was kind of, I'm never going to read the Iliad.
Yeah.
I did. I read it in Greece as well while I was on holiday with my family once. Yeah. It was the book I took with me.
Nice.
To be fair, I read it and did not put it down, but I would not read it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's a one and done job. You know, I've done it once, but bucket list ticked off.
I kind of want to go and watch Troy now.
We have that big off screen. We do. You can make your dreams happen.
Make your dreams happen.
Thinking about the Untamed and the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, which it's based on, I think that's a really interesting one for me, because I feel about it kind of similarly to how I feel about fanfic, in that both of them enrich my experience of the other in a way that means that I am just so grateful that they both exist.
Yeah.
You know? Like, if I'd read the book first, I don't think I would have watched the show, because the book is, because it's not censored, because it's on the internet, and the gay is real and there. One of the things the book is talking about very explicitly is, like, how homophobic a society it is that they live in, and it makes for really hard reading in that sense, because the internalized homophobia, like Wei Wuxian's internalized homophobia, is just And like the homophobia of the society is so, and you're just breathing it constantly, and it's really hard. I think it's really well written. I think the plot is hands down much, much better. The book is just so much better constructed than the TV show. And like some of that is because, you know, ghosts are uncommunist, so they had to change the plot a bit. And like also homosexuals are uncommunist, so we've got to like take that out of it.
Also because Wei Wuxian is more morally ambiguous.
Yeah, the book is a lot more like Wei Wuxian does some up.
Whereas the TV show is like, he's not my poor little Meow Meow. He's a precious being who can't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Zheng Guang Yao is the little Meow Meow, but yeah.
That's another bit we should do, actually. Who is
Oh my
Blorbo
gosh.
and who is your poor little Meow Meow?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, if I'd read the book first, I wouldn't have watched the show because I found it really hard in a way that I think it's supposed to be.
But you wouldn't go back for more, you know?
I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, now I know which bits to skip because the sex is terrible. Speaking of, as we were earlier, of the terrible sex writing. But then this is another one where, like, I don't know how much of that is lost in translation. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so that's a really interesting one. The other thing in that vein I wanted to talk about was Heaven Official's Blessing, because that's one I read the book first and then I watched the animated. And the animated series actually helped clear up for me, like, what the was happening. Like, I really enjoy Heaven Official's Blessing. I think if you're going to read any MXTX, that is where I would suggest you start, because I think it's the most polished. It doesn't have any of the really unpleasant bad sex dubcon kind of the stuff that's really difficult to kind of read about. You know, it doesn't have any of that really. And the romance is just so soft. The romance is so soft and good. And like neither of the main characters are conflicted about it at all, really. They're just like, I vibe with this. This is good. We're having a good soft time. So yeah, that's my recommendation. Read that one first. But yeah, there's a lot going on. And having the adaptation there to kind of like rewatch and be like, oh, that's who everybody is. Oh, that's how that plot plays out.
Well, that's why I got into Game of Thrones. I watched the first season of Game of Thrones in order to have faces to put to the names when I read the books, and then I went away and read all the books that were out, and then went back to the show. And then, you know, regret. But
I think it's a bit like what Lottie was saying earlier about the audio-visual stuff, is that, like, yeah, I think sometimes with something complicated, it's a lot easier to get your head around if you already know what everybody looks like, and you get the broad strokes of... I mean, I think that's an advantage of adaptations, actually, is that I don't think you can simplify without dumbing down because of the influence that the individual actors have and the way that the world building can be embodied. That's not really the word, but like the world building is literal. You have built it. You have designed for eye protein if you're Guillermo del Toro. And like you can make it easier to digest without losing, like, you know, some nuance you're going to lose, and that will take me on to my next question. But like, it makes it easier without necessarily, making it stupid, which is, I really appreciate for complicated things. But yeah, I was going to say, do you guys think there's anything you've read that you think is unadaptable? Like, what makes an unadaptable book?
Honestly, maybe the Silmarillion. Because it's like a history, and it's so broad in scope. You're not really following specific characters necessarily. You're following like dynasties. And so some of the world building and the greater scope, this sort of broader scope, like epic narrative that he's telling, is like the history of this world. It would be really hard to bring some of that down to a personal level, I think, that you would need in order to engage with it visually.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, you don't want to watch something that basically looks like someone playing Civ.
Valid.
But there are bits of it that you could do, for sure, and I think that's what Amazon's going to up.
Yeah. To be honest, I think like maybe Brand Sander's Way of Kings, just because it's such it's an absolute beast of a book. I mean, to be honest, before Wheel of Time was being adapted, I still think that is a really difficult novel to adapt, or series of books to adapt, because there's so much in it, and there's so much that, for me personally, I'm like, how dare they miss this tiny little reference that, you know, they cut that out, cry. But it is adaptable in the sense of it's very real. It doesn't need that much CGI. Whereas Way of Kings it is not only huge scope, it would need tons of CGI. And the only way you do it properly is if you had a TV show with a lot of money thrown at it. And to be honest, even then they probably f it up. So like, I think maybe Way of Kings, because it also probably wouldn't do justice in my mind. I mean, maybe like 20, 30 years down the line, and I can have kids and I can take them to the film version or whatever, or like, you know, import it into your brain or whatever they've got when I'm like 70. But like, you know, up till that point.
It's me, boy, the adaptation of Way of Kings, talking to you from inside your brain.
You just plug yourself in and watch it, you know, however you want to see it.
See, this is really interesting because like whenever I think about things being unadaptable, the thing that always springs to my mind is actually wordplay, usually. And I mean that in the widest possible sense of books where you can tell how much the author loves the language.
Okay, yeah.
So like Pratchett, I think, is really hard to adapt for that reason.
Yes,
I think, and I'm nothing I've seen has convinced me that anybody's done it properly yet. Even Good Omens, I don't think has quite hit the spot for me.
It doesn't preserve a lot of the Pratchettness of the book. It preserves it preserves the sort of the humanism, definitely, but not the wit necessarily.
And I think those are really hard to do because so much of it it's in the words. It's of its form in a way that like, and I think actually Douglas Adams is another one.
That was the other one I was thinking of. Like, I do really enjoy both the TV. I haven't listened to the radio adaptation, but the movie with Martin Freeman, unfortunately. But there's also a really good TV series. And I enjoy both of those. I think they're really good, but they're not as good as the books.
Yeah. Whereas I haven't spent that much time on Hitchhiker's Guide adaptations, but I have tried most of the Dirk Gentlys that are available.
Oh, of course, yes.
And I have to say, the Netflix one is the only one that comes close, even though it is not the same at all. So, like, every time I've tried to watch, like, the BBC ones, I've just gone, I'm bored. I don't care about this. This isn't fun in the way that I was expecting it to be. And I think the Netflix adaptation, while completely avoiding the plots and a lot of the setup, and like the premise is completely different, but like I think it captures the sheer riotous glee of Douglas Adams in a way that I don't think any other adaptation that I've seen.
See, I didn't like the Netflix adaptation for that reason.
Really?
That I like the bonkers plot of the book. Like I tell you what, I was thinking actually is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the film adaptation from that from like 2004. I think that did a good job of like translating that book to screen, because that book is bonkers, but it did. Yeah. I don't know. I remember watching it.
Like that's fair enough, but it's just one of those again where I'm like, I thought the film was fine.
It's not great.
I didn't get that same
feeling.
That feeling of like,
it didn't capture one of the things that I love most about the book.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the thing I think the Netflix did was that it was chaotic and it was colourful and it was weird as shit, and I had no idea what was going on for half of it, and we are going to just throw in some random time travel that we don't explain until the very last minute. You know, and that felt closer spiritually to me to what I loved about the books than any of the like we're vaguely trying to follow the actual plot stuff. You know, this is another one where I'm like, the two things are completely different, but I'm so glad they both exist.
Yeah.
You know, even if the relationship between them is tenuous.
That is fair. That is completely fair.
I'm wondering about which Austen is it that we did recently where it's like unfortunately she couldn't be a gothic heroine because her mother was still alive.
Oh, Northanger Abbey.
Yeah. I wonder if adaptations find it really hard to capture that part of the book where Austen is so clearly stated, it's like saying something, but it's within like the meta. It's not between characters.
How do you do the looks into camera like they're on The Office?
Yeah,
without having the author there to look into. So that actually brings me to an adaptation that I never finished, that I actually think does justice to another thing that I would have said was unadaptable. Is the series of Unfortunate Events, the Netflix series of Unfortunate Events. Because the way they got round that is by having Lemony Snicket walk in and out and narrate.
Yeah.
And that means you get to keep so much of what made the books, because the books were a revelation to me as a kid. Like you read something and you just, I feel like most things, most writers have a style. Yeah. But like a lot of the time it's not enough, like you kind of know, but it's like it's not a massive like ping on your radar, this is definitely so and so, only so and so could have written this. Or this is the specific stuff, because like Daniel Handler's written a bunch of other stuff that doesn't feel like a series of unfortunate events at all. And like it was the first time I'd read something where I went, somebody's making a point, or like you can do that, this it was craft in a way that was like big and in your face and unique at the time. Like nobody wrote like that in my experience, and it was a game changer. And then to have that adapted and somebody managed to capture the sort of like
that aspect of it.
Also the way it's almost, the fact that it's like this weird compiled text where the author is a character and that character, that the author doesn't exist. The author that's the character doesn't exist, but there is somebody behind that. Just the levels of meta and the way it's talking about perspective, and I feel like the way the Netflix adaptation did it is maybe the only way you could even come close to getting that across in a visual medium. I tell you what, I think the Northanger Abbey has to be a sitcom. If you do it, I think you have to go bonkers for yonkers. You have to go full on, like what's his face, the llama in Emperor's New Groove, like pausing things to scribble on the screen. You need that. Yeah. Like you need at least the sarcastic voiceover.
It needs to. It needs the Enola Holmes treatment.
Yes! Oh my god! Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like I loved that film so much.
Yeah.
That was such an enjoyable film. Like again, zone your brain out.
And you can't really call it a Holmes adaptation. It's entirely its own thing using the Holmes IP.
It is an adaptation of a book. It's just not. Yeah. It's the books are a thing, but which I've never actually read.
I think they're for like young children though. They're like for
They're younger than I think even the film is. I think
younger young adult. YYA? Can you say young adult?
Tweens.
Very young adults.
Tweenagers. The cursed, that's not a portmanteau, is it?
That cursed age.
Like, I was thinking of the word, but you're right, the age is also cursed.
I mean, that's just me reflecting back on that time.
I'm going to have a last question, and then I think we're going to need to wrap up. But do you guys have any, like, unpopular adaptation opinions? Like, opinions that would get you chucked out of the fandom, or that would start massive discourse? Like, anything that people love that you hate, or vice versa?
Ooh, depends on the fandom, right?
Okay. I mean, the only thing I can think of that is of popular opinion right now. So, Bridgerton.
Yes.
I enjoyed it up to about a episode, whichever it is, where it was just basically like sex scene after sex scene. And I was like, we don't need, I didn't want this. I wanted diverse Regency, coffee shop AU, fic, pretty dresses.
I tell you what, thinking about unadaptable things, I actually think erotic fiction, and specifically fiction that has a lot, like the point in scare quotes is the sex. I think actually that maybe doesn't adapt very well.
Oh, I have an unpopular adaptation opinion. And this is kind of a stretch, because I'm going to talk about the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And they are an adaptation. They are an adaptation of a theme park ride.
Oh, that is true.
Yeah,
strictly speaking. And my unpopular opinion is that I like the third movie the best.
Actually, no, I like the third movie.
I like the third movie.
Most people don't like the third movie.
What? I like not the fourth.
There's no fourth movie, Lottie. There's no fourth movie. They stopped at 3.
Anything past 3. I like the third. Like the third movie had a great soundtrack. It was a good time. It was a fun
exquisite
time.
soundtrack.
It was bonkers, and we loved it. Like,
I think once you get past how just ignore the fact that everybody's betraying each other 2 seconds. The actual culmination of the character stuff is really good. If anything, I think the second film is the weakest.
Yes, I think the second film is the weakest as well.
Yeah, well, you have to say which one, because nothing happens. Like it's very like it's fun, but it's very forgettable in a way that I don't. The first
There's a lot of good Norrington content in it. I'll give you
that. That is true.
And I do love my boy Norrington. But it's, and I think that's like a common thing with second movies, right? Especially if they know it's going to be a trilogy, because you've got obviously your first act and your last act have a lot of structure that is just built into the fact that they are the first and last act. And the second, it's like, okay, well, we kind of just have to get from A to B. How do you make that interesting?
To tell you where I think doesn't do that is original trilogy Star Wars. I think Empire Strikes Back is one of the strongest, actually, and I think that's a really interesting. But yeah, it's rare. You're right. I'd like to think. I think Lyriel is maybe the only other place where I've read a second book and didn't just feel like it was filler for the finale.
Yeah,
in a trilogy. Actually, I'm saying that. I think original Artemis Fowl, the first 3. That's also a very good trilogy.
We got to do the second one of those.
We do
here on this podcast.
Yeah, I think that it's so much fun. It's like the original trilogy of those is like it's a perfect, complete what's it. Each book is a perfect, discrete unit, and the 3 as a whole make for a really satisfying set. You know, I enjoyed some stuff that happened in the books afterwards, as much as I read of them, but it never again for me had that sense of like, this is a unit that has been perfectly constructed to be the thing that it is.
We're nearly at an hour on this episode. Let's wrap this up.
Okay, so obviously we don't have anybody that we want to fight unless it's maybe the Game of Thrones guys. Although to be fair, they f***ed themselves. They were like,
absolutely,
"Oh man, we're gonna garbage this thing so that we can get on Star Wars quicker." And then we garbaged it so hard that they didn't give us Star Wars. Like, damn, son.
Lol.
Sucks to suck. Couldn't happen to a more deserving pair of dudes.
Do you think we have time to like do a what else are you guys reading? Because that's the thing I'm always interested to hear.
What am I reading? Quick.
Or consuming. Or, you know, what crafts have you completed?
I've started watching The Expanse. That's a book adaptation on Amazon Prime, which I'm very much enjoying.
Yeah.
And I am still continuing to listen to Guards, which is like my pick-me-up when I just need a pick-me-up.
Yeah. Pratchett's good for that.
That's it. And I started listening to Son of Achilles, but I already said that earlier.
I am beset by all of the things that are making my life extremely busy over the next forever. So I have been reading for the podcast, and I have been watching YouTube to fall asleep to. And that's
nice.
It.
Excellent. 10 out of 10.
As I've been splitting my time between... So every now and again, I fall back into my Star Wars hyperfixation, and the Obi-Wan trailer came out. Ooh, so I have been rewatching... Yeah. I watched Bad Batch, I've rewatched Rebels. I am most of the way through a reread of Re-Entry, which is this, like, epic time travel, semi-fix-it, Legends-based Star Wars fanfic series that is just, like, off the charts amazing. It's one of those ones where you're like, they walk in there with a pairing and you're like, you can't convince me to ship this.
And then they do.
And you're like, fuck you for this, actually. And I'm reading as a like, get your brain off the screens and also maybe consume something that isn't Star Wars. Please, God, I'm begging you. I am reading The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which is extremely good. It's hitting my kind of, I guess, I don't know if you could call it like, because the author's Vietnamese American, I think, and then the setup of the book is more Imperial China. But that kind of vibe. It's doing a lot of cool things with structure and storytelling, and like, I'm enjoying it a lot. And it's got the thing, the How to Lose the Time, no, This Is How You Lose the Time War had of being like, the chapters are so like self-contained that you can just be like, I will read one before bed, and this will be my good screen break, and then I'll need the break between them to like fully absorb everything cool about that chapter, you know? Nice. It's very cool. Yeah. Anyway, yes, I heartily recommend it. But yes, we are over an hour. We have to wrap it up super fast.
Wrap it up. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Remember to follow us on your podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And give us a like or review if you enjoyed this episode. If you want to see our full reading schedule, it's on our website. So if you're going to have a check out our website, it will have the full reading schedule for when we release the full episodes and the mini episodes and the wildcards. So you can see it all on there. And if you want to connect with us, link with us on our socials. They're all linked down below, or email us on our email address via our website. So yeah, say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time. Bye.